More than 3,000 years ago, in a quiet valley surrounded by rugged hills, one of the greatest underdog stories in history unfolded. On one side stood an army paralyzed by fear. On the other stood a single young shepherd with nothing but a sling, a few stones, and an unshakable faith in God. This is the true story of David and Goliath. The conflict began when the Philistine army gathered to challenge the nation of Israel. The two armies camped on opposite hillsides, separated by the valley of Elah. Every morning and every evening, for 40 long days, a giant warrior named Goliath stepped into the valley and issued the same terrifying challenge. Choose one man to fight me. If he defeats me, we will become your servants. But if I defeat him, you will serve us. Goliath was no ordinary soldier. The Bible describes him as an enormous warrior, heavily armored from head to toe in bronze. His spear was massive, his shield was carried by another man, and his reputation alone struck fear into anyone who heard his name. He mocked the armies of Israel and openly insulted the God they worshipped. King Saul and every soldier in Israel were terrified. Day after day, no one accepted the challenge. The giant's voice echoed across the valley as hope slowly faded from the Israelite camp. Far away from the battlefield lived a young shepherd named David, the youngest son of Jesse. While his older brothers served in Saul's army, David spent his days caring for sheep in the fields of Bethlehem. Although he appeared ordinary, David had already faced incredible dangers. He had defended his father's flock against lions and bears, risking his own life to protect helpless animals. Through every challenge, he believed that God had been with him. One day, Jesse asked David to bring food to his brothers at the battlefield. Carrying bread and grain, David arrived at the Israelite camp just as the armies were taking their positions. Then he heard it. Goliath walked into the valley once again, shouting insults and demanding that someone come forward to fight him. David looked around in disbelief. Every soldier remained silent. He asked the men nearby, "Who is this uncircumcised Philistine that he should defy the armies of the living God?" Unlike everyone else, David did not see an unbeatable giant. He saw a man who was challenging God's people. Word quickly reached King Saul that a young shepherd was willing to fight. David was brought before the king. Saul looked at him with concern. "You are only a young man," Saul said. "Goliath has been a warrior since his youth." But David answered with confidence, "Your servant has been keeping his father's sheep. Whenever a lion or a bear came and carried off one of the sheep, I went after it. I struck it and rescued the sheep from its mouth. The Lord who rescued me from the paw of the lion and the paw of the bear will rescue me from this Philistine." Saul realized there was no changing David's mind. He gave David his own armor, placing a bronze helmet on his head and fitting him with a coat of armor. David tried to walk, but the armor was heavy and unfamiliar. He stopped and removed every piece. "I cannot fight wearing these," he said. "I am not used to them." Instead, David picked up his shepherd's staff, selected 5 smooth stones from a nearby stream, placed them into his shepherd's bag, and carried only his sling. As David walked toward the valley, Goliath stared at him in disbelief. The giant expected a seasoned warrior. Instead, he saw a young shepherd carrying a stick. Goliath laughed. "Am I a dog, that you come to me with sticks?" He cursed David and promised to leave his body for the birds and wild animals. But David stood firm. "You come against me with sword, spear, and javelin, but I come against you in the name of the Lord Almighty, the God of the armies of Israel, whom you have defied." Then David declared that everyone watching would know that victory does not come by sword or spear, because the battle belongs to the Lord. Suddenly, the giant began moving forward. David did not retreat. He ran toward Goliath. Reaching into his bag, he pulled out a single stone. With practiced precision, he placed it into his sling and spun it with incredible speed. The stone flew through the air. It struck Goliath squarely in the forehead. The giant staggered. For a brief moment, time seemed to stop. Then the mighty warrior crashed face first onto the ground. Silence filled the valley. The giant who had terrified an entire nation for 40 days had fallen because of a single stone. David ran to Goliath, stood over him, and took the giant's own sword. The battle was over. When the Philistine army saw their champion defeated, panic spread through their ranks. They turned and fled. The Israelites, whose fear had suddenly become courage, charged after them and won a decisive victory. That extraordinary day changed David's life forever. The humble shepherd would eventually become the greatest king in Israel's history. He would unite the nation, establish Jerusalem as its capital, and leave behind a legacy remembered thousands of years later. Yet the story of David and Goliath is about far more than defeating a giant. It reminds us that courage is not the absence of fear. It is choosing to move forward despite fear. While everyone else focused on the size of the obstacle, David focused on the greatness of God. For generations, this story has inspired millions because it speaks to every challenge we face. Every person has giants. Some are fear. Some are failure. Some are uncertainty. Some are impossible circumstances that seem far too big to overcome. But the lesson remains the same. Victory is not always won by the strongest, the oldest, or the most experienced. Sometimes it belongs to the one who refuses to give up and places complete trust in God. More than 3,000 years later, the Valley of Allah still echoes with one timeless truth. No giant is greater than the God who stands with those who trust him. If you enjoyed this biblical story, don't forget to like this video, subscribe to the channel, and share it with someone who needs encouragement today. Which Bible story would you like to see next? Let us know in the comments below.